Of course, you never quite know how things are going to turn out in boating. One minute you're living your boating dreams, the next minute you're chasing them down the road. Just like some of the things we'll see in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Boca Inlet, where this was the scene this past weekend, when our good friend Wavy Boat's crew was out there filming as usual on Boca Inlet, when all of a sudden one of our camera guys, Seth Stern, who's been with the team for about 4 years, heard some commotion behind him. He turned around and to his surprise, they found a swimmer just off the inlet who had been drug out off the beach in a rip current. Quickly, Seth and two other Good Samaritans who happened to be out on the inlet at the time jumped into action to attempt to run out and save the swimmer. The three went out there and worked to pull the swimmer from the rip current and bring him back to the rocks. The images we see here were captured by a good friend of the channel, South Florida Boats. Due to the quick work of the three Good Samaritans who jumped into the water to save the swimmer and the local lifeguards, no major injuries were reported in the incident. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to keep us in Florida but take us over to the other coast to Sarasota, where this was the scene just a little over a week ago, when a local resident was standing in his backyard and he noticed a boat violently circling out of control. He quickly called 911 to alert local authorities to the out-of-control vessel. A local Sarasota Marine Police unit decided to respond to the scene as seen in these images here. The responding officer is Captain Michael Skinner. As he approaches the vessel, it appears there is nobody on board, so initially assumes that somebody must have fallen off the boat and was not wearing their engine cutoff switch lanyard. So he decides he's going to go ahead and try and pin the boat into the seawall to make sure they get it under control so it doesn't endanger anybody else or any property. Once the officer gets the vessel pushed into the wall, he quickly leaves the helm of his boat, jumps on board the other vessel, uses his remote kill switch to kill the engines on the police vessel, and pulls the engine cutoff switch to kill the engine on the vessel that was out of control. But as he boards the vessel, he notices this boat is not quite empty. Apparently, the captain on board the vessel was driving down the waterway, hit a large wake, and the large wake knocked him from the helm of the vessel onto the floor of the boat, knocking him partially unconscious for a few moments. By the time officers got on board the boat, the man was awake and was able to communicate with officers to explain what had happened. Unfortunately, he's expected to fully recover from his injury. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Texas, where this was the scene just a few days ago near Galveston, when a barge wound up slamming into pillars on a bridge that connects Galveston and Pelican Island. The bridge wound up collapsing onto the barges, causing a full closure of the bridge at the time and also causing an oil leak from one of the barges. The accident occurred shortly after 10 a.m. as a tugboat operator was pushing the two barges up the river when all of a sudden he claimed to hit heavy currents during high tide and wound up losing control of the vessel. The barges that were being pushed by the tug vessel were bunker barges, which are used to refuel ships and had a 30,000-gallon carrying capacity. At this time, it's uncertain exactly how much oil has leaked from the barges, and crews have not released exactly how much oil was on the barges at the time of the incident. They have, however, released they've closed down a 6.5-mile section of the waterway in efforts to try and contain and control the environmental impact this may have. They did say this occurred in a very rural area. They expected to have very minimal economic impact, as Pelican Island is a small island with less than 200 people on it and mostly used for commercial and industrial purposes. Now, as for the bridge, the Pelican Island Causeway was actually rated as in poor condition by the Federal Highway Administration's National Bridge Inventory released back in 2023. And plans were already in place to actually replace this bridge in 2025. I'm just assuming now that this process is probably going to be sped up a little bit, and no injuries were reported, fortunately, during the incident. Thanks for watching, crew. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening out on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know when you might see your stories over here. Just like Seth Stern, Frank Kramer, and South Florida Boats did this week. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here.